The city burned. Flames licked the remnants of what had once been New Providence's capital, casting an orange glow against the night sky. Smoke billowed from collapsed structures, the acrid smell of ionized air mixing with dust and desperation. 6 hours earlier, the colony had been a peaceful agricultural outpost, its citizens living in harmony with the planet's generous bounty. Now it was a battlefield. Sergeant Juan Hayes crouched behind the fractured remains of what had been the colony's administrative building, pressing his back against still warm concrete. His combat medic kit was nearly depleted, the contents scattered across the various wounded he'd treated throughout the night. Dust coated his sweat-streaked face, highlighting the deep lines that had been etched there by years of similar scenes on dozens of worlds. He'd retired from active service 8 months ago, choosing New Providence as his sanctuary. The irony wasn't lost on him, escaping war only to have it follow him to the edge of human space. "Torres, what's your position?" he whispered into his communicator, the device crackling with interference from the Kethar jamming systems. "2 blocks north," came the strained reply. "Heavy casualties in the market district. They hit the evacuation route. It's a bloodbath. Hayes." Juan closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself 3 seconds, no more, to process the information. Then he was moving, staying low, his boots crunching through pulverized glass and debris. "Hold position! I'm coming to you!" The Kethar had struck without warning, their massive warships descending through the atmosphere like vengeful gods. They were humanoid, but distinctly alien, taller, with skin that ranged from deep blue to purple, and facial features that seemed harsh to human eyes. Their technology was marginally superior, their tactics ruthless. This was the 4th colony they'd attacked in as many months, and intelligence had no concrete explanation for their sudden aggression after decades of cold but stable relations. Juan moved through the devastation with practiced efficiency, pausing only to check the occasional body for signs of life. Most were beyond help. The dead wore civilian clothes. Farmers, teachers, engineers. New Providence had no standing military, only a small security force supplemented by veterans like himself who'd settled here. He was halfway to Torres's position when the ground beneath him shuddered. Another bombing run. He pressed himself into a doorway as dust rained down from above. When the rumbling stopped, he continued forward, but a sound caught his attention. A soft moan, barely audible above the distant weapons fire. One hesitated. Torres needed backup. The wounded at the market needed medical attention. But something about that sound pulled at him, and he found himself moving toward it instead. The moan led him to a collapsed residential unit. Its prefabricated walls crumpled like paper. Juan activated his helmet light and scanned the rubble. Nothing moved. He was about to continue on when he heard it again, a pained exhale coming from beneath a section of fallen wall panel. He approached cautiously, weapon ready. Shifting aside a piece of debris, he froze. Lying half-buried in the rubble was a Kethar. Not just any Kethar, a female officer. Based on the ornate armor and insignia, her deep indigo skin was marred by a massive wound across her torso, and purple-blue blood pooled beneath her. Her eyes, silver irises in black sclera, locked onto his. A mixture of defiance and pain reflected there. Juan's finger tightened on his weapon's trigger. A high-ranking Kethar officer could provide valuable intelligence. Or he could simply walk away and let her die slowly, under the rubble of the world she'd helped destroy. The Kethar officer's lips moved, her voice a rasping whisper in the strange, musical language of her people. Juan's translator picked up fragments. "Finish it, coward." 20 years of combat experience told him to secure her as a prisoner. But something older, more fundamental, the oath he'd taken as a medic, made him holster his weapon instead. "I'm not going to kill you," he said, kneeling beside her and opening his medkit. "And I'm not going to let you die, either." Her silver eyes widened, then narrowed with suspicion as he began scanning her injuries with his medical analyzer. "Why?" she managed in heavily accented English. Juan didn't look up from his scanner. "Because that's not who I am." The analyzer's results weren't promising. Massive internal bleeding, punctured lung equivalent, fractured exoskeletal plates. She needed full medical facilities, not field treatment. But she'd die long before any help could arrive, if help was even coming for the colonists, let alone an enemy combatant. "What's your name?" he asked, as he began applying pressure bandages to the worst of her external wounds. She remained silent, her breathing labored. "Fine, I'll call you Blue, then—" That earned him a glare. "I am Velina," she said finally, each word clearly causing pain. "Queen Commander of the Kethar Expeditionary Fleet." Juan nearly dropped his bandage. Not just an officer, the officer. The equivalent of an admiral. Possibly the architect of the entire invasion. "Well, Your Majesty," he said, recovering quickly. "You've got a punctured lung and severe internal bleeding. I need to stabilize you before moving you." "Why bother?" she asked, blood bubbling at the corner of her mouth. "Your people will execute me, or mine will find me and consider me compromised." "Cross that bridge when we come to it," Juan muttered, administering a universal coagulant that his scanner indicated was compatible with Kethar physiology. He'd treated alien species before, but never a Kethar. Their metabolism was higher, their circulatory system more complex. As he worked, his communicator crackled to life. "Hayes, where the hell are you?" Torres's voice was strained, urgent. One hesitated, then responded, "Found a survivor. Treating now." "Leave them. We've got critical wounded at the market shelter. They're breaking through our lines." The communicator went silent for a moment. Then Torres's voice returned, more controlled but tense. "Rescue ships are inbound. ETA 4 hours if they can break the blockade. We need to consolidate at the emergency bunker." Juan looked down at Velina. Her eyes were half closed, her breathing shallow but stable for now. The coagulant was working, but she needed surgery within hours. "Copy that," he replied. "I'll meet you there." "What's your 20? Juan glanced around at the rubble. "Residential Block C, moving to extract a VIP.
VIP? Who?
"I'll explain at the bunker. Hayes out." He cut the connection before Torres could ask more questions. Velina's silver eyes had opened fully, watching him with renewed intensity. "VIP?" she echoed, her voice slightly stronger. "Very important patient," Juan replied, packing his equipment. "Can you move?" She attempted to rise and immediately collapsed back with a hiss of pain. "That's what I thought." Juan assessed the situation quickly. The nearest emergency bunker was 40 kilometers away, in the foothills of the Providence Range. With the city under active bombardment and Kethar ground forces advancing, getting there would be nearly impossible, especially with a wounded enemy commander. But the alternative was leaving her to die or be captured by her own forces, who might indeed consider her compromised after contact with a human. Neither option sat well with him. "This is going to hurt," he warned, sliding his arms beneath her. Her jaw tightened, but she nodded once. When he lifted her, her only reaction was a sharp intake of breath, though he knew the pain must be excruciating. Tough, this one. "There's a maintenance access tunnel 3 blocks from here," he told her as he carried her through the ruined building. "It leads to the old mining network. We can use it to get out of the city." "My forces will detect us," she murmured, her head resting against his armored shoulder. "Maybe, but they're busy with bigger targets, and the mines have heavy mineral deposits that should mask biosigns." He peered around a corner, checking for patrols before continuing. "Why are you telling me this anyway? Aren't you hoping they'll find you?" She didn't answer immediately, and when she did, her voice was softer. "They will kill me for my failure, and you for your kindness." Juan frowned. "Your troops would kill their own commander?" "The mission is paramount," she replied. a hint of bitter resignation in her tone. "I have failed to secure my objective quickly and cleanly. The fleet admiral will assume command." This information was potentially valuable, but Juan filed it away for later. Right now, survival was the priority. They moved through the devastated streets, Juan keeping to shadows and debris fields. Twice they had to hide as Kethar patrol skimmers passed overhead, their searchlights cutting through smoke and dust. Once, they froze in place as a ground unit moved through a nearby intersection, the soldier's armor catching the flames of burning buildings. Velina remained silent throughout, conserving her strength. Her weight was considerable, heavier than a human of similar size would be, but Juan's combat enhancements and experience made the burden manageable. More concerning was her temperature, which was rising steadily according to his medical scanner. Infection was setting in, despite the antibiotics he'd administered. They reached the maintenance tunnel entrance as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky. The metal door was partially blocked by fallen debris, but Juan managed to shift enough to create an opening. Inside, emergency lighting still functioned, casting a dim red glow over the utilitarian corridor. "Going down," he warned, easing them through the narrow gap. The tunnel sloped downward, following the natural contours of the land. After 15 minutes of cautious progress, they reached a junction where the modern maintenance corridor intersected with the older mining tunnels, relics from the colony's early days. "Need to rest," Juan said, carefully setting Velina down against a wall. She didn't protest, which concerned him. Her skin had taken on a grayish undertone, and her breathing was increasingly labored. He checked her wounds, replacing blood-soaked bandages. The bleeding had slowed, but not stopped entirely. More worrying was the heat radiating from her skin, far beyond what his database indicated was normal for Kethar. "I need to know about Kethar physiology," he said, offering her water from his canteen. "What medicines are safe? What should I watch for?" She accepted the water, drinking carefully. "Your human antibiotics are insufficient. Our immune response is aggressive. It will attack your medicines. That explains the fever. Any allergies to common pharmaceuticals?" "Unknown. We have little contact with humans. Yet here you are, invading our colonies." Juan couldn't keep the edge from his voice. Velina's silver eyes fixed on him. "You know nothing of necessity."
Enlighten me, then. Why attack peaceful settlements? What could you possibly gain?
She turned her face away.
We should continue moving.
Juan knew she was right. They were still too close to the city, but his frustration bubbled over. "You owe me an explanation. I'm risking my life to save yours." "I did not ask for salvation," she countered, attempting to rise on her own. The effort sent her into a coughing fit, purple-blue blood speckling her lips. Juan steadied her, his anger dissipating as quickly as it had formed. "Easy. You're right. We need to keep moving." He gathered her into his arms again. "But this conversation isn't over." They continued deeper into the mining tunnels, the modern lighting giving way to darkness, broken only by Juan's helmet lamp. The air grew cooler, with a mineral tang that reminded him of his childhood visits to Earth's natural cave systems. After an hour of slow progress, they reached a large chamber where several tunnels converged. Ancient mining equipment stood silent, preserved by the dry air. Juan set Velina down on a relatively flat area and checked his communications. Nothing but static. They were well and truly cut off from the surface now. "How far to your bunker?" Velina asked, her voice weaker than before. "About 35 kilometers as the crow flies. Less if these tunnels run in the right direction." Juan consulted his mapping device. "We'll rest here for an hour, then continue. You need to conserve strength." She didn't argue, which told him more about her condition than any medical scan could. He used the time to take stock of their supplies: limited water, minimal rations, dwindling medical supplies. His weapon was fully charged, but ammunition was finite. While checking Velina's bandages again, he noticed an unusual device integrated into her armor near the collar. "What's this?" he asked, pointing. She tensed. "Personal shield generator, damaged in the collapse." Juan studied it with professional interest. "Impressive tech. Might explain why you survived when the building came down on you."
It absorbed much of the impact before failing, she confirmed.
He hesitated, then asked, "Could it be repaired? Might be useful if we encounter trouble." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Not without Kethar tools and expertise." "Worth asking." He sat back, taking a sip of water. "So, your fleet. What's their objective? And don't tell me it's classified. We're well past that." Velina was silent for so long that Juan thought she might have drifted to sleep. Finally, she spoke, her voice distant. "Survival."
"Whose survival? Yours?"
"My people." She shifted, wincing with the movement. 3 solar cycles ago, a biological agent was released on our homeworld. Weaponized, we believe, though we never identified the source. Juan frowned.
"A plague."
"A slow-acting prion disease, incurable by our science. It affects the neural tissue, eventually causing madness and death." Her silver eyes reflected the dim light of his lamp. "1/3 of our population is infected. More daily."
"And you think Earth was responsible?"
Her laugh was bitter.
"Perhaps. Perhaps not. It hardly matters now."
"It matters if you're attacking human colonies because of it," Juan countered. "We attack because we must relocate our uninfected population before the disease consumes us entirely." She fixed him with a steady gaze. "Your colonies have hospitable environments and established infrastructure." The implication was clear. They weren't just attacking, they were planning to stay. "There are diplomatic channels for this kind of situation," Juan said. "Treaties, aid agreements. We attempted diplomacy. Your Commonwealth denied our requests." "That can't be right," Juan protested. "The Commonwealth wouldn't refuse humanitarian aid. They refused resettlement rights, offered scientific collaboration instead." Velina's voice dripped with contempt. "While our people continue to die." Juan absorbed this information in silence. If she was telling the truth, and he had no way to verify it, the situation was far more complex than a simple invasion. "How many are infected?" he asked finally.
"Over 4 billion, with more diagnosed every day."
The number staggered him. The entire Kethar population was around 12 billion, spread across their home system.
"And your plan is to relocate 8 billion people to human colonies? That's impossible."
"Not all at once," she said. "Key populations first. Scientists, engineers, leaders, genetic stock. Establish beachheads. Then bring more as new settlements are constructed. At the expense of the humans already living there." Her silence was answer enough. "There has to be another way," Juan insisted. "Quarantine the infected. Focus on finding a cure." "You think we haven't tried?" For the first time, real emotion cracked through her composed exterior. "Our best minds have worked tirelessly. The disease adapts, and quarantine." She shook her head. "Would you isolate 1/3 of your species to die slowly, watching their minds dissolve while their bodies continue functioning?" The desperation in her voice was unmistakable, and Juan found himself without an easy answer. The enormity of the Kethar crisis was beyond anything he'd imagined. "I'm sorry," he said finally, meaning it. "But this, attacking colonies, killing civilians, it can't be the answer."
"It is the only answer we have left,"
she replied softly. Juan checked his timepiece. Their hour was nearly up. "We should move." He helped Velina to her feet, noting with concern how much of her weight she now allowed him to support. The fever was worsening. They needed to reach the bunker soon, or all this would be academic. She wouldn't survive. They continued through the tunnels, Juan consulting his mapping device at each junction. The darkness pressed around them, broken only by his helmet lamp, creating strange, shifting shadows that played across the rough-hewn walls.
Tell me about New Providence,
Velina said after they had been walking for some time, her voice barely above a whisper. Juan glanced down at her in surprise.
Why?
Distraction, she admitted. From the pain. He nodded in understanding. It's a young colony, established 14 years ago. Primarily agricultural, with some light manufacturing. Population of about 40,000. He paused, adding quietly, before today.
You chose to retire here? 8 months ago. After 20 years of combat medicine, I wanted somewhere peaceful.
The irony wasn't lost on either of them.
The soil is rich, grew the best tomatoes I've ever tasted in my garden.
Tomatoes. Red fruit, acidic, sweet, good in salads, better in sauce. She was silent for a moment. We have something similar. We call it vachal. Blue, not red. The simple exchange felt surreal, discussing vegetables while both their species were locked in mortal conflict. Yet Juan found himself grateful for the normality of it. Your people, Velina continued, the ones at the bunker, they will not welcome me. Probably not, Juan admitted. But they'll treat you. Medical personnel are trained to help everyone, regardless of circumstances.
Even the architect of their colony's destruction?
Juan didn't have a comfortable answer for that. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. They lapsed into silence again. The only sounds their footsteps and Velina's increasingly labored breathing. The tunnels grew narrower in places, forcing them to move single file, with Juan supporting more of Velina's weight as her strength waned. Hours passed. Juan's muscles burned with fatigue, but he pressed on, driven by the knowledge that stopping meant Velina's certain death. The mining tunnels meandered, sometimes doubling back on themselves, adding precious kilometers to their journey. They were navigating a particularly narrow passage when a low rumble vibrated through the stone around them. Dust sifted down from overhead.
What was that?
Velina asked, tensing. Bombing on the surface. Maybe, Juan replied, though he wasn't certain. Or mining charges. Some of these tunnels might still be active. The rumbling intensified, and small rocks began to fall around them.
Move,
Juan urged, half carrying Velina as they rushed forward. The tunnel behind them collapsed with a deafening roar, a wall of dust billowing toward them. They emerged into another chamber, just as the roof of the passage gave way completely. Juan stumbled forward, losing his grip on Velina. She fell with a cry of pain, clutching at her wounded side. When the dust settled, the way back was completely blocked.
Are you all right?
Juan asked, kneeling beside her. She nodded once, though her face was contorted with pain.
The passage?
Sealed. We'll have to find another route. He helped her into a sitting position against a boulder, then consulted his mapping device. The news wasn't good. The main tunnel ahead is still accessible, but it adds another 10 kilometers to our journey.
I will not survive that long,
Velina stated with clinical detachment. Juan scanned her with his medical analyzer, frowning at the results. Your fever's rising, infection spreading. He rummaged in his medkit. I'm going to try a stronger antibiotic cocktail. It might help, might make things worse. Do what you must. He prepared the injection, his movements practiced despite his exhaustion. This is going to burn. She didn't flinch as the needle entered her arm. Your care is unexpected.
Like I said, it's who I am.
He secured the empty syringe in his kit.
No.
She shook her head weakly.
It is exceptional. Most humans would have left me to die, or killed me themselves.
Maybe, but that wouldn't solve anything, would it?
It would satisfy vengeance.
Juan sat beside her, allowing himself a moment of rest. Vengeance is easy. Peace is harder. Her silver eyes studied him. You believe peace is still possible, after this? I have to, he replied simply. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it? They rested longer than Juan had intended, both of them pushed to their physical limits. When they finally resumed their journey, Velina insisted on walking under her own power as much as possible, though she frequently needed to lean on him for support. The new route took them deeper into the mountain, through passages that showed signs of having been undisturbed for decades. In some places, ancient support beams had rotted away, forcing them to navigate carefully around partially collapsed sections. "Tell me about your world," Juan said as they paused for a brief rest. "Before the disease." Velina's expression softened with memory. "Beautiful. 3 moons that cast purple light over silver forests. Cities built into mountain faces, with crystal spires that caught the sunlight." She paused. "Our people were scholars, artists, explorers, and warriors," Juan added. "All species fight when necessary," she countered. "But it was not our defining characteristic, not until recently. And now we are defined by desperation." Her silver eyes clouded. "Our greatest minds succumbing to madness. Children born with a disease already in their systems. Quarantine zones that become death camps." She looked away. "We do what we must to survive. Even if it means becoming something you're not?" The question hung between them, unanswered. They continued on, the hours blurring together in the unchanging darkness of the tunnels. Juan's helmet lamp began to dim as its power cell depleted, casting weaker shadows on the rough walls. Eventually, they reached a junction where fresh air flowed from one of the passages, an indication they were nearing an exit to the surface. Juan checked his mapping device. "We're close to the foothills," he said. "The bunker should be about 5 kilometers from here, assuming we can find a way to the surface." Velina nodded weakly. The antibiotics had stabilized her condition temporarily, but her strength was clearly fading. They had been traveling for nearly 18 hours, with minimal rest. The tunnel, with the fresh air breeze, led them upward, eventually terminating at a heavy metal door, another maintenance access point. Juan tried the manual release, but years of disuse had seized the mechanism. "Stand back," he warned, drawing his weapon. He adjusted the setting to a narrow beam and carefully cut around the lock. The door groaned open, revealing a star-filled night sky. They emerged onto a hillside overlooking the valley where New Providence had been built. From this distance, the devastation was still visible, fires burning across the cityscape, the occasional flash of weapons fire. Above, the massive silhouettes of Kethar warships hung in the sky like malevolent clouds. "Your ships are still here," Juan observed, helping Velina onto a flat rock where she could rest. "I thought they'd have completed their assault by now." "Resistance has been stronger than anticipated," she replied, her breath fogging in the cool night air. "Your people fight well for farmers." "They're fighting for their homes." Juan checked their surroundings, confirming they were alone. "The bunker is northwest of here, built into the next ridge. We'll need to cross open ground to reach it." Velina's gaze remained fixed on the burning city. "My fleet commander will have assumed control by now. The bombardment pattern has changed." Juan followed her line of sight. Indeed, the attack seemed more systematic now, targeting specific sectors rather than the blanket destruction of the initial assault. "Is that good or bad for the colonists?" "It is. Thorough," she said quietly. "They are clearing sectors one by one." The implication was clear: methodical extermination rather than chaotic destruction. Juan felt cold that had nothing to do with the night air. "We need to move," he said, urgency creeping into his voice. "If your commander is being that systematic, they'll eventually target the emergency bunkers." Velina attempted to stand, but collapsed back with a hiss of pain. When Juan moved to help her, he noticed fresh blood soaking through her bandages. "You're bleeding again," he said, kneeling to examine the wound. What he found made his heart sink. The main injury had reopened, and the surrounding tissue showed signs of advanced infection. Dark lines radiated outward from the wound. Blood poisoning. "This is bad." "I know," she replied calmly.
I can feel it spreading. Juan ran calculations in his head. At their current pace, they wouldn't reach the bunker for hours. She might not last that long, and even if she did, the medical facilities there might not be sufficient to save her. We need to treat this now, he decided. I'm going to have to open the wound, clean it thoroughly, and close it again. Her silver eyes widened. Field surgery? With what equipment? What I have left in my kit. He was already laying out his supplies on a clean section of his jacket. It's not ideal, but if we don't do something now, you won't make it to the bunker. Velina studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. Proceed. Juan administered the last of his painkillers, though he knew they would be inadequate for what was to come. This is going to hurt, he warned. A lot. I understand. She positioned herself on the flat rock, looking up at the stars. In our culture, warriors focus on the stars during pain. They are constant, eternal. Juan nodded, preparing his instruments. Good strategy. Ready? She took a deep breath and fixed her gaze on the night sky. Ready. The surgery was brutal in its simplicity. Juan reopened the wound, drained the infected fluid, cleaned the area as thoroughly as possible with his limited supplies, then sutured it closed again. Throughout the procedure, Velina remained conscious, her only reactions occasional sharp intakes of breath and the tightening of her jaw. By the time he finished, Juan's hands were slick with her purple-blue blood, and sweat dripped from his brow despite the cool night air. He had done everything possible with what he had available, but whether it would be enough remained to be seen. Done, he said finally, applying fresh bandages. You did well. Velina's eyes had never left the stars. As did you, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Juan cleaned his hands with an antiseptic wipe, then checked the time. The surgery had taken nearly an hour. We should move soon. Can you stand? She nodded, though the movement was weak. With his help, she managed to get to her feet, leaning heavily against him. They had just started down the hillside when a blinding light illuminated them from above. Juan looked up, shielding his eyes, to see a Kethar patrol skimmer hovering 20 meters overhead, its searchlight fixed directly on them. Velina, he said quietly, if those are your people, now would be a good time to tell them not to shoot us. She straightened, as much as her injury allowed, her expression becoming regal despite her condition. When she spoke, it was in the musical language of the Kethar, her voice carrying a command presence that transcended her physical weakness. The skimmer descended slowly, kicking up dust as it settled on the hillside nearby. The hatch opened, and 3 Kethar soldiers emerged, weapons trained on Juan. They wore full combat armor, with reflective visors that concealed their faces. Velina spoke again, more forcefully this time. The soldiers hesitated, then lowered their weapons slightly. One of them responded, their tone questioning. Velina's reply was sharp, authoritative. After a moment, the soldier nodded and stepped forward, offering support. 2 more skimmers appeared overhead, circling the area. What's happening? Juan asked, maintaining his hold on Velina. They wish to take me to our medical facilities, she replied. I have told them you are to be treated as my personal protectorate. And they agreed to that? They have no choice. I am still their queen. She turned to face him fully. Come with me. Sergeant Hayes. Your bunker will likely be targeted soon. I can ensure your safety aboard my vessel. Juan hesitated. The offer was tempting, not for his safety, but for the chance to continue ensuring hers. Yet, there were his people to consider. Torres and the other survivors would be at the bunker, possibly wounded, definitely needing every trained medic available. I can't, he said finally. My place is with my people. Velina studied him, then nodded slowly. I understand. She spoke again to the soldiers, who seemed to protest before reluctantly acquiescing. They will transport you to your bunker before taking me to our ship. You trust them to do that?
They will obey me, she said with absolute certainty. And I trust you. One Hayes. An unexpected development. The use of his name, the first time she had spoken it, caught him by surprise. Likewise, Queen Velina. With the soldiers' assistance, they boarded the skimmer. The interior was designed for Kethar physiology, with seating and controls slightly too large for human comfort. Velina was carefully secured in what appeared to be a medical berth, while Juan sat nearby, acutely aware of the armed soldiers watching his every move. The skimmer rose smoothly into the night sky, banking toward the ridge where the emergency bunker was located. Through the viewport, Juan could see the other skimmers maintaining formation around them. "Your commander," he said to Velina. "Will they honor your protection?" "Admiral Corvex is dedicated to the mission," she replied carefully. "But he will not directly countermand my authority without significant cause." "Is saving one human significant cause?" Her silver eyes met his. Perhaps, but saving the human who saved his queen might give him pause. The skimmer began its descent toward a concealed entrance in the ridgeline, the bunker's location. As they approached, Juan saw signs of recent combat, blast marks on the surrounding rocks, debris scattered across the approach. "Your people have been busy," he observed grimly. "Standard procedure," Velina replied. "Neutralize command and control centers." "Those are civilians in there. Medical personnel. Children." She didn't respond, but something like discomfort crossed her features. The skimmer landed 100 meters from the bunker entrance. One of the soldiers spoke to Velina, who nodded and replied. The hatch opened. "They will wait 5 minutes for you to enter your facility," she told Juan. "Then we will depart." Juan stood, hesitating at the hatch. "What happens now? To New Providence? To your people?" "I do not know," she admitted. "But I will remember what you have done, One Hayes, and I will seek a better way than this. It wasn't a promise of peace, but it was something." He nodded. "Good luck with your surgery. Try not to undo all my hard work." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I will endeavor not to." Juan stepped out of the skimmer, the cool night air filling his lungs. He had taken only a few steps when Velina called after him. "Sergeant!" He turned back. "Thank you," she said simply. "For carrying me when I could not walk, for treating me when I was your enemy, for showing me that there is another path besides destruction." Juan nodded once, then turned and made his way toward the bunker entrance. Behind him, he heard the skimmer's engines powering up. He didn't look back. The bunker guards recognized him as he approached, lowering their weapons and opening the heavy blast doors. Inside, the facility was crowded with survivors, civilians mostly, with a handful of security personnel and medical staff moving among them. "Hayes!" Torres's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd. His fellow veteran pushed through the throng, face breaking into a relieved smile. "You made it, you crazy bastard!" The smile faltered as Torres took in Juan's blood-stained uniform. "Are you hurt?" "Not my blood," Juan assured him. "How are things here?" Torres's expression darkened. "Bad. We're at triple capacity. Medical supplies running low. Communications still jammed." He lowered his voice. "And the Kethar found us. We've repelled 2 assaults already." "Any word from the Commonwealth? Rescue ships?" "Nothing yet. If they're coming, they're taking their sweet time." Torres studied him more closely. "Where's this VIP you mentioned? And why did a Kethar skimmer just drop you off?" Juan hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal. Before he could decide, a commotion near the communication station drew their attention. "Signal coming through," an operator called. "Commonwealth frequencies." Torres and Juan pushed their way to the station, where a young technician was adjusting controls on an antiquated radio setup. "Repeat. This is Commonwealth vessel Dauntless to New Providence emergency channels. We have broken through the Kethar blockade with supporting fleet. Ground forces deploying to secure colonial centers.
Please respond with status and coordinates. A cheer went up from those close enough to hear the transmission. The technician hastily responded, providing their location and situation. "The cavalry's finally here," Torres said, clapping Juan on the shoulder. "Now we might have a chance." Juan wasn't so certain. Commonwealth forces against a determined Kethar fleet, even with the element of surprise. The battle would be devastating for both sides. And for what? A colony already half destroyed? If Velina was telling the truth about the Kethar disease, their desperation would only make them fight harder. "I need to speak with whoever's in command," he said abruptly. "Military command, not the bunker administrator." Torres frowned. "That would be Colonel Reeves. He arrived with a squad of Marines about 2 hours ago. But why?" "No time to explain. Where is he?" "Command center. Lower level." Torres caught his arm as he turned to go. "Hayes, what's going on? What happened out there?" One met his friend's concerned gaze. "I learned why the Kethar are attacking, and I think there might be a way to stop this before it gets worse." Understanding dawned in Torres's eyes. "The VIP. It was one of them, wasn't it?" "Not just one of them. Their queen." Torres's jaw dropped. "You're shitting me!" "I wish I were. She was injured in the initial attack. I treated her, got her back to her people." Juan ran a hand through his dust-caked hair. "She told me things, Torres, about why they're here. It's not what we thought." For a moment, Torres looked like he might argue further, but instead, he nodded once. "Go. Talk to Reeves. I'll cover for you up here." "Thanks." Juan squeezed his friend's shoulder, then made his way to the stairwell leading to the lower level. The command center was a stark contrast to the crowded main bunker, organized chaos rather than desperate confusion. Military personnel moved with purpose between stations, monitoring communications and sensor displays. At the center of it all stood a tall, austere man with silver-shot black hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to authority. Colonel Reeves. One approached, waiting to be acknowledged. After a moment, Reeves looked up from the display he'd been studying. "Sergeant Hayes, I presume," he said, his voice carrying the crisp accent of Earth's European sector. "Your friend Torres informed us you were out there." He gestured to the bloodstains on Juan's uniform. "I see it wasn't without incident." "No, sir." Juan straightened instinctively. "Request permission to speak privately, Colonel. I have intelligence regarding the Kethar invasion." Reeves's eyebrows rose slightly. "Intelligence? From where?" "From their commanding officer, sir." That got the colonel's full attention. He motioned Juan toward a small adjoining room that appeared to serve as a private office. Once inside with the door closed, Reeves leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "Explain." Juan did, recounting his encounter with Velina as concisely as possible, from finding her in the rubble to performing emergency surgery on the hillside. He detailed what she had told him about the Kethar disease, their failed diplomatic overtures, and their desperate plan for relocation. When he finished, Reeves was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You expect me to believe this?" he said finally. "That the Kethar are attacking our colonies not out of aggression, but as a refugee crisis?" "I believe it, sir," Juan replied steadily. "Queen Velina had no reason to lie to me. She was dying, dependent on my care. Or she was manipulating you, playing on your medical oath to ensure her survival." "Possible," Juan conceded. "But the details were too specific, her emotion too genuine." Reeves paced the small room. "Even if it's true, what would you have me do with this information? The Commonwealth fleet is here. The battle is joined. Are you suggesting we surrender a colony because the Kethar have a sad story?" "No, sir. I'm suggesting we negotiate from a position of understanding rather than ignorance." Juan leaned forward. "The Kethar need help, not conquest. If what Velina told me is accurate, their entire civilization is at risk. And so they risk ours instead,
Reeves shook his head. Unacceptable.
Sir, with respect, war between our species will result in massive casualties on both sides. The Commonwealth might win, but at what cost? And the Kethar will just become more desperate. Attack another colony.
What's your alternative, Sergeant? Contact Velina. Arrange a ceasefire. Offer what we should have offered from the beginning. Medical collaboration. Temporary resettlement for critical populations. Joint research into a cure. Reeves studied him thoughtfully. You're remarkably sympathetic to an enemy that just bombed a civilian colony.
I'm sympathetic to avoiding unnecessary death, sir, on both sides.
Before Reeves could respond, the door opened, and a communications officer entered. Sir, priority message from the Dauntless. The Kethar fleet has ceased fire and is requesting parley. They're asking specifically for Sergeant Juan Hayes to be present.
Reeves and Juan exchanged surprised glances.
It seems your queen has been busy, Reeves observed dryly. Very well. Tell the Dauntless we'll shuttle up within the hour. He turned to Juan. I hope your assessment of the situation is correct. Sergeant, a great deal is riding on it.
Yes, sir.
An hour later, Juan found himself aboard the Commonwealth warship Dauntless, being escorted to the bridge by a Marine detail. He had been allowed to clean up and change into a fresh uniform, but exhaustion weighed heavily on him after more than 24 hours without proper rest. The bridge was a hive of controlled activity, with officers at various stations monitoring the standoff with the Kethar fleet. At the center of it all stood Admiral Chen, a compact woman with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing.
Sergeant Hayes, she greeted him, her tone neutral. Colonel Reeves has briefed me on your unusual situation.
Yes, ma'am. You should know that I was against this meeting. The Kethar have attacked 4 colonies without provocation. They've killed thousands of civilians. In my view, the only appropriate response is decisive military action. Her gaze was piercing. However, their sudden desire for negotiation is curious, and their specific request for your presence even more so. I treated their queen, ma'am, saved her life. So I'm told. She didn't sound particularly impressed. We'll be meeting aboard their command vessel, the Queen's own ship. Apparently, you will accompany myself, Colonel Reeves, and Dr. Eliza Winters from our xenobiology department. Juan nodded, relieved that they were taking the disease aspect seriously enough to include a specialist. One more thing, Sergeant, Admiral Chen added. If this turns out to be a trap, I will hold you personally responsible. Is that clear? Crystal clear, ma'am. The shuttle journey to the Kethar vessel was tense and silent. Through the viewport, Juan could see the massive alien warships surrounding them, at least a dozen, each larger than the Dauntless. If hostilities resumed, the Commonwealth forces would be severely outmatched. They docked with the Kethar flagship, a colossal vessel with sweeping, organic lines that contrasted with the utilitarian design of human ships. After cycling through an airlock adapted for human use, they were met by a delegation of Kethar officials, led by a towering male with midnight blue skin and ceremonial armor. Admiral Chen, he greeted in accented English. I am Fleet Admiral Corvex. Welcome aboard the Sovereign Light. Introductions were made with formal stiffness on both sides. When Corvex's gaze fell on Juan, something like grudging respect flickered in his silver eyes. Sergeant Hayes, the Queen speaks highly of your skills and compassion. How is she? Juan asked, professional concern overriding protocol.
Recovering. Our medical team completed what you began.
Corvex's expression was unreadable.
She insists on attending this meeting, against medical advice.
They were escorted through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate. High ceilings, dramatic lighting, displays of what appeared to be ancient weapons and battle trophies. The message was clear. You are in the heart of a warrior culture. The conference room continued this theme, with a massive table carved from what looked like a single piece of iridescent stone. At the far end sat Velina, clothed in flowing robes rather than armor, but no less regal for it. Her skin had regained its deep indigo hue, though she still moved with careful precision that spoke of ongoing pain. She rose as they entered, inclining her head slightly, a gesture of respect but not submission. "Admiral Chen, Colonel Reeves, Dr. Winters." Her gaze softened almost imperceptibly when it reached Juan. Sergeant Hayes. The human delegation took their seats on one side of the table, facing Velina and her advisors, Corvex and two others, who were introduced as their chief medical officer and diplomatic minister. "Let us speak plainly," Velina began. "Our attack on your colonies was an act of desperation, not malice. Sergeant Hayes has likely informed you of our situation." "He has," Admiral Chen replied coolly. "Though I find it difficult to believe that wholesale slaughter of civilians was your only option." Corvex bristled, but Velina raised a hand to silence him. "It was not our only option. It was, however, the option chosen after your government rejected our diplomatic overtures." "What exactly did you propose?" Colonel Reeves asked. The diplomatic minister, a female Kethar with lavender skin, responded. 2 standard years ago, we approached your Commonwealth Council with evidence of our crisis and requested emergency resettlement rights for our uninfected population. We offered technological exchange, resource sharing, and defensive pacts." "And the Council rejected this?" Dr. Winters seemed genuinely surprised. "They offered scientific collaboration on a cure, but no resettlement," the minister confirmed. "Our experts had already determined that a cure would take decades to develop, if it was possible at all. We do not have decades." Admiral Chen frowned. "This doesn't align with Commonwealth policy on humanitarian crises." "Perhaps," Velina said, "your council did not believe the severity of our situation. Or perhaps they feared that accepting billions of Kethar refugees would destabilize human colonies." Her silver eyes were unwavering. "Either way, we were left with few options." "So you chose war," Reeves stated flatly. "We chose survival," Corvex countered. "As would you, in our position." The tension in the room was palpable. Juan glanced between the delegations, seeing positions hardening on both sides. This was exactly what he had feared, mutual distrust overwhelming the possibility of resolution. "Your Majesty," he said, addressing Velina directly, "when I found you in the rubble of New Providence, I had a choice. I could have left you to die, or taken you prisoner, or killed you outright." He paused, meeting her gaze. "Instead, I chose to help you, not because it was easy or politically expedient, but because it was right." He turned to face both delegations. "We all have that same choice now. We can continue this conflict, with massive casualties on both sides, or we can find another way." Dr. Winters leaned forward. "If I may, I'd like to see the data on this prion disease. Perhaps there have been advancements in our medical science that could offer new approaches." The Kethar medical officer, who had remained silent until now, nodded cautiously. "We can provide our research, but understand that we have explored every avenue available to us." "Sometimes fresh eyes see what familiar ones miss," Winters replied. Velina studied the human delegation thoughtfully. "What are you proposing, exactly?" Admiral Chen exchanged glances with Reeves before responding. "A temporary ceasefire, exchange of medical information, joint research into potential treatments or cures." "And the resettlement issue?" Corvex pressed. "That would require full Commonwealth Council approval," Chen admitted. "But if the situation is as dire as you claim, I believe arrangements could be made for limited emergency resettlement while research progresses." "Limited," Corvex scoffed. "We have billions at risk." "It's a starting point," Reeves interjected. "Better than continuing a war neither side truly wants." The discussion continued for hours, delving into technical details of the disease, potential research protocols, and preliminary resettlement frameworks. Throughout, Juan observed the subtle shift in dynamics, from adversarial to cautiously cooperative, particularly as Dr. Winters and the Kethar medical officer found common ground in their shared scientific language. Finally, Velina raised a hand, silencing the ongoing technical discussion. Enough for now. We have established a foundation for further dialogue. She turned to Admiral Chen. I propose the following: a formal ceasefire, immediate withdrawal of Kethar forces from New Providence, establishment of a joint medical research facility, and Commonwealth consideration of emergency resettlement for critical Kethar populations. Chen considered this for a moment. I can agree to the ceasefire and joint research facility immediately. The resettlement issue will require council approval, but I will advocate for it personally. And what guarantee do we have that this will not simply buy time for your military to prepare a stronger response? Corvex demanded. The same guarantee we have that you won't use the ceasefire to regroup and attack another colony, Reeves countered. An impasse seemed imminent when Velina spoke again. Perhaps we need something more binding than words. She turned to Juan. Sergeant Hayes demonstrated the power of individual action and trust. I propose an exchange program, Kethar scientists and diplomats living among humans, and human counterparts among our people, not as hostages, but as bridges between our cultures. The suggestion took both delegations by surprise. An interesting proposal, Chen said finally. It would create a certain investment in maintaining peace and facilitate greater understanding between our species, Winters added, clearly warming to the idea. After further discussion, the framework of an agreement began to take shape. It was far from perfect. Trust was minimal. Details remained to be worked out, and both sides maintained reservations. But it was a beginning. As the meeting concluded, Velina approached Juan, while the others were engaged in final conversations. Your medical skills may have saved more than one life, Sergeant Hayes, she said quietly. I hope so, he replied. There's been enough death already. Indeed, she hesitated, then continued. When our researchers establish the joint facility, would you consider joining the project? Your perspective would be valuable. The request surprised him. I'm just a field medic, Your Majesty, not a research scientist. You are someone who chose compassion over hatred, who carried an enemy 40 miles to safety. Her silver eyes held his. Such qualities may prove as important as scientific expertise in the days ahead. Before he could respond, Admiral Chen called for the human delegation to prepare for departure. Velina inclined her head in farewell and returned to her advisors. The journey back to the Dauntless was considerably less tense than their arrival had been. Admiral Chen and Colonel Reeves conferred quietly about next steps, while Dr. Winters reviewed the preliminary data she had received from the Kethar medical officer. This prion structure is fascinating, she murmured, almost to herself. Complex, but not necessarily untreatable with the right approach. You think you can help them? Juan asked. She looked up, blinking, as if surprised to be addressed. Possibly. Their research is thorough, but constrained by certain assumptions. And there have been advancements in our prion research that they may not be aware of. She studied him curiously. You risked a great deal for one of them. Why? One considered the question. Because in that moment, she wasn't one of them. She was just someone who needed help. Winters nodded thoughtfully. Simple but profound. Perhaps that's what both our species have been missing. 6 months later, Juan stood on the observation deck of the joint research facility that had been established in neutral space between Commonwealth and Kethar territories. Through the panoramic viewport, he could see ships from both fleets patrolling nearby, still watchful, still cautious, but no longer actively hostile. The facility itself had become a symbol of what was possible when cooperation replaced conflict. Over 300 scientists, human and Kethar, worked side by side, their combined expertise making remarkable progress on understanding and potentially treating the prion disease. More significant, perhaps, was the cultural exchange that had developed alongside the scientific collaboration. Initial wariness had gradually given way to genuine curiosity and even friendships between members of the two species. "Admiring the view again?" Velina's voice came from behind him. Juan turned with a smile. The Kethar Queen visited the facility regularly, both to review progress and to demonstrate her personal commitment to the project. Today, she wore simple robes rather than formal regalia, her only concession to rank being a small circlet of silver on her brow. "It's worth admiring," he replied. 6 months ago, those ships would have been firing at each other. "Indeed," she joined him at the viewport. "The Commonwealth Council has approved the first resettlement plan. 3,000 of our medical professionals and their families will relocate to New Providence next month." "That's excellent news," Juan said, genuinely pleased. The colony was still rebuilding, but much of the damage had been repaired. More importantly, attitudes had begun to shift, with many colonists recognizing the potential benefits of Kethar medical knowledge. "It is a small beginning," Velina acknowledged, "but a significant one." "And the research?" "Dr. Winters believes they have identified a promising approach. Early trials on infected tissue samples show a 70% reduction in prion replication." Her expression remained composed, but Juan had learned to read the subtle shifts in her silver eyes. There was cautious hope there. "Not a cure yet," he said, "but a path toward one." "Yes." She turned to face him fully. "I am returning to our homeworld tomorrow to observe the trials firsthand. I would be honored if you would accompany me. Sergeant Hayes." The invitation caught him by surprise. "Me? I'm still just a field medic. Your Majesty, the scientists barely let me touch their equipment." A hint of amusement touched her features. "You are far more than just anything. One Hayes. You are the bridge that made all of this possible." She gestured toward the facility around them. "Besides, I promised to show you our silver forests under purple moonlight, did I not?" He smiled at the memory of their conversation in the mining tunnels, when survival had seemed far from certain. "So you did. Then you will come?" Juan looked out at the stars, the same stars they had both gazed upon during that desperate surgery on a hillside. "I'd be honored." Velina nodded, satisfaction in her expression. "I shall make the arrangements." She turned to leave, then paused. "Do you ever regret it? Your decision that day?" "Not for a moment," he replied without hesitation. "Nor do I," she said softly, "though I did not understand its significance at the time." They stood in companionable silence for a moment longer, watching the stars and the ships that moved among them. No longer enemies, not quite allies, but finding their way towards something new. "Until tomorrow, then," Velina said finally. "Until tomorrow," Juan agreed. As she departed, Juan remained at the viewport, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. One decision, one act of compassion in the midst of war, had altered the course of two civilizations. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, choices mattered. The path to peace was rarely easy, often dangerous, but always worth pursuing. Outside, the stars continued their eternal watch, bearing witness to the tentative beginnings of understanding between species that had nearly destroyed each other. The future remained uncertain, with challenges still to face and trust still to build. But for now, in this moment, it was enough to know that they had found another way, one that began with carrying an enemy to safety, and might yet lead to salvation for both their worlds.